You know what I never forget about the greatest games I've ever played? It's the worlds. Those universes, those towns, cities, and underground caverns that are home to the stories and characters we fall in love with. Locations, mysteries, and ideas that beckon us to explore and venture into the unknown, and worlds that light the fire in our souls to know what's out there. So today, let's take a look at the magic behind some of the most beautiful and awe-inspiring places ever put in the game's medium to date, and see what it is that lies at the heart of the most important part of any meaningful experience: the beauty of it all. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the most beautiful game worlds of all time. Whether it's the vibrant colors in every scene, or how the trees sway in the hands of the wind as they beckon the player towards each and every goal. There's a tranquility and stillness that this game understands that often is left void in other titles. And that's because Ghost of Tsushima is all about the journey, not the destination. Taking place during the Mongols' invasion and conquest of Japan, the setting is ripe with political intrigue and sets the tone of the entire epic storyline. But the real shining achievement here is just how cinematic the world really is. Every second you play feels like a blockbuster movie, moving from scenes in scenic and bombastic locations like Yamabuashi's Peak and the Golden Forest, to more somber and evocative set dressing a la the Spirit Grove Cemetery or the Drowned Man's Shore. And each of these unmistakable zones is home to a very unique feeling all to its own. Some are black and white, some have gusting winds that sway the blooming blossom trees with petals cascading through the air, and others provide endless fields of rice ripe for the picking. But no matter where you go in game, you never lose a complete and utter sense of imagination, of pure beauty brought to life on screen. It's one of those games where you simply lose track of time as you play, because you really do get fully immersed into the world and become so overwhelmed by it. Even during many of the combat sections, especially with some of the bosses, watching as the camera pans out and the scene comes to life as you shift your feet through mounds of leaves never gets old. And even just the way in which the world is designed and how you travel through it is all constructed in the most cinematic way possible. You truly become a samurai warrior in a mystical place of dreams almost. And you see, the beauty of this world and its setting is the main character of the game, and feudal Japan comes to life because of how engrossing every second is. More than almost any other games out there, Ghost of Tsushima is so vehemently focused on beauty and presentation. Oftentimes, entire scenes revolve around nothing more than the splash of color of one massive tree in an otherwise desolate place, or a sea of vibrant yellow across the ground that brings so much life to the experience and separates this world from all the other generic ones out there in games. And because of how impactful so many of the moments are, it tells a story all to itself. The tenets of a great samurai: honor, respect, duty, and diligence are all expressed without even a word needing to be uttered. It's the perfect example of how important a setting and how it is crafted can be to telling stories in games, because the worlds we fall in love with oftentimes are the ones that have a distinct sense of beauty all to themselves, not the ones that simply serve as a playground to nothing more than an assortment of game mechanics. Some of the most powerful moments in games stem from this title right here, and that's because beauty in games is such an underrated thing. Oftentimes we focus so much more on how a game plays or how the narrative is structured, whether or not there are bugs or if the graphics look just right. But I think the key to so much great art isn't necessarily all that, but rather something more: how a game makes you feel. Because if a game can make you feel something, then it has the chance to last with you for a lifetime, not just for as long as you play. And sometimes all you need for a sense like that is a world full of such beauty and awe that it's hard to look away, one that sweeps you off your feet and beckons you in. But Ghost of Tsushima isn't the only one. There's a lot more where that came from. There simply aren't any other worlds out there quite like Skyrim. Its frozen tundras, its underground caves full of secret ancient civilizations long forgotten, and forests teeming with life, all that give birth to something that's hard to capture in words alone. And that's because more than anything, Skyrim is a game that seizes a sense of beauty that can't even be described. That feeling you get as you round a bend atop an embodying mountain and the music swells into the scene, as a storm rises on the horizon overlooking a massive and sprawling world all yours to explore. And no matter what you decide to do, no matter which way you choose to venture forth, there's always a story waiting to be told. Random encounters that transition into full quest lines, and flora and fauna alike interacting with one another seamlessly. The world feels alive in ways that many others don't. Every location you go to feels lived in, whether it be in caves or cities alike, and each is masterfully constructed to tell stories on their own through nothing more than the environment. Like seeing the light of a fire illuminate a cave's entrance in the distance, only to find half-eaten skeletons inside, which evokes a sense of wonder and storytelling without even one word being spoken. And there are countless breathtaking environments that litter this game world, from the underground and cosmic Blackreach to the thrones of Sovngarde and the throat of the world. Each and every location is distinct and mesmerizing in its own way, all painting the picture that this world is one worth exploring. But maybe the greatest accomplishment of this game, and really the entire Elder Scrolls series of games as a whole, is the feelings they inspire in all of us. So many games have never-ending open worlds filled to the brim with fetch quests and locations that serve no other purpose than to facilitate some sort of gameplay element. But Skyrim forgoes all of that, instead focusing on making each scene a moment to its own. The gameplay loop of Skyrim is exploring. It's about the journey, not the destination. Walking around in an open field and hearing the roar of a dragon in the distance pierce through the sounds of a river flowing next to you. That's what real exploration is all about. The beauty in this game doesn't come from the combat or the dialogue, or even in most cases the quests, which I think often are lackluster. It comes from truly feeling like there is a world out there to explore, and one that is home to so many different and amazing environments. And maybe one of the biggest strengths that adds to all of this is the setting, because Skyrim takes place in the northern lands of Tamriel, the continent the Elder Scrolls games take place in, and this means most of the region is covered in snow or blistering cold. It's an almost depressing, yet surprisingly serene feeling that almost no other worlds capture. Every step you take in this world feels foreboding and worrisome, where it feels like at any point you could succumb to the weather, or even worse, a giant monster hiding in the shadows. But beneath all of that is music and set dressing that crafts some of the most memorable moments I've had in games, where simply the beauty and strangely the slowness of the world completely sweep you into the experience. You know, sometimes beauty isn't about having the best graphics or the most advanced lighting engine. Sometimes it's about nothing more than giving the player a sense that there's a world out there worth exploring, that only by slowing down and taking in each environment and the things it has to say can we go on one of the most important adventures in our life. More than maybe any game out there, Skyrim is one that truly encapsulates what a game world should be. Something that, on nothing more than beauty alone, can sustain entire decades worth of stories and fandom that clamor for more. The reason I'm so excited for Elder Scrolls 6 isn't the quests, the writing, the gameplay, or the updated graphics. It's the fact that something might just come along again and create a world so beautiful that despite many of its pitfalls, you can't help but get lost in it. Something Skyrim so elegantly showed us years ago. When you hear this song, what comes to your mind? Probably something like this, right? It's so rare that music and scenery of a game can come so perfectly together. But in Ori, the world on offer is so beautiful, it's not hard to see how they pulled it off. And that's because throughout Ori and the Will of the Wisps, there are countless scenes that clutter the screen with mesmerizing bursts of color and environments that come to life. Oftentimes, you will see the movement of plants in the wind as you run across environments, or the subtle sounds of the earth as you maneuver deep within its crust. And throughout it all, you're accompanied by a soundtrack full of chimes and hymns. locations, as well as many moments where the sound seems to take a back seat as you find new and interesting places where your eyes get to tell the story instead. But whether you're in a more somber or happy zone in the game, the way in which the story is told is so captivating. Without many real words being spoken at all, Ori tells the tales of heroes and villains alike, along with many sentimental moments of brevity in between fights. And speaking of fights, some of the boss battles in this game are so unforgettable. There are moments where massive monsters will chase you at breakneck speeds as they tear through the environment, and during it all, your screen will explode into a flurry of color seldom seen in many other games. In a lot of ways, Ori feels like a response to many of the titles of the early 2000s that were so full of drab and dreary color schemes, where dark and depressing grays were the usual repertoire and blood exploding out of every enemy was commonplace. Ori isn't like that though. Every scene and location in the game breathes so much life and emotion. Even just watching someone else play the game, it's immediately obvious just how much love and care was put into the visuals here. Down to the tiniest details, even on just how your character moves and jumps, often flailing and contorting themselves in fantastical ways or curling into a ball before casting a massive spell on enemy combatants. And even more than all that, there really is just a sense of beauty in this game that it manages to capture so perfectly. Like when you find an ability tree and watch as it comes to life on your approach with a guiding beam of light at the center of its housing, placing a key into a locked door and peering on as a spark of light beams itself onto the screen with a catchy sound effect. Seeing the water shudder with each of your character's footsteps as it refracts the light from above. There are so many people that will probably skip games like this just because they're almost 2D-like. The camera angles, the pacing, it's just not for everyone. But I think Ori in a way transcends all of that. And that's because Ori captures a sense of emotion and meaning that truly reaches beyond the medium and perspective in which it's set. Because while there are so many other games in this genre that also reach such high highs too with their art design, for example Hollow Knight and the macabre places it manages to evoke, there truly isn't anything out there quite like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, whose main triumph isn't the story, the mystery, or even the combat, of which I love in this game by the way, but rather that it manages to evoke the hero within all of us, through nothing more than an unbelievably breathtaking world and music that sets the scene through every step. Truly, one of the most beautiful game worlds that's ever been crafted, and if you haven't already, do yourself a favor and play this on a massive HDR 4K TV at 120 FPS and thank me later. Red Dead Redemption 2 for many people is the greatest game ever made, and that's for good reason. It has amazing writing and narrative beats, characters that will make you cry, and a setting that feels more reactive than any game ever made to date. But for a lot of us, the best part of this game is something a lot more simple: the world and the beauty that it so perfectly captures. From the Baroque city streets of St. Denis to the desert wastelands of New Austin, or even the woodlands full of tall trees and swamps or mountain ranges covered in snow. Throughout the runtime of Red Dead 2, there's not a single moment you can find, not a single frame, not one time that you couldn't pause, take a screenshot, and marvel at the beauty in front of you. And that's because there's a special feeling you get in this game, even just walking around, where every distance in front of you is covered in serene wilderness. Bears stalk their prey in the mask of the woods, alligators comb the depths of waters and swamps, and the scariest monsters of all, humans, react so realistically and believably to situations that it's hard not to fall instantly in love with this world's trance. There's so many times when playing this game where you will be galloping your horse across a massive valley and just have to stop to take it all in, as a sunset starts to swallow the sky whole and dawn begins to set in, as a campfire rages in the distance and the howls of wolves can be heard in a canyon miles off, or the sounds of your footsteps as they clap through the dirt beneath your feet and the moon illuminates your travels at night. There's a special sort of craftsmanship in the world on offer here, and even though I personally find it so tedious to play at times because of how slow and methodical it is, I can't deny that it really just adds to the beauty of this world. And on top of this, there's so many times in this game that the use of cinematography and lighting come to life and transform otherwise ordinary scenes into old Western style Tarantino-esque adventure, like robbing a train barreling through the deep woods, or the infamous shootout at the manor. But throughout it all, the shining star continues to be the world, and just how elegantly crafted it all is. The landscape, like snow, will deform form under your feet as you traverse it, and the animals you shoot will litter blood throughout the environment like a crime scene. There really is just a movement to this world that feels so real, and because of that, it's one of the most immersive out there. And even now, years after the game's initial release, it still continues to be one of the greatest looking of all time, with vistas and environments that have yet to be matched. I mean, truly, look at some of these scenes. They go beyond even what words could describe, and instead capture a deeper sense of beauty within all of us that games seldom manage to understand, even many of the greats. Sometimes the best part of a game isn't the fun combat or the twists and turns in a story, but rather just those slower moments. Those moments where you forego all the action and instead gaze out into the world in front of you and watch as the sky turns black, the trees begin to wobble in the wind, and the animals' eyes glow with anticipation. Too often in games we focus on gameplay and story that often we forget just how important, and even more interestingly, how impactful amazing graphics and art design can really be. Because at the end of the day, games are about making us get lost in another world, and maybe more than any other games out there, Red Dead Redemption 2 focuses solely on this goal of crafting a world so true, so real, and so raw that simply by being in it, you can't help but to be captured by its spell. Without a doubt, one of the most beautiful game worlds of all time. A lot of the most beautiful worlds in games tend to focus on grand scale and vistas, sprawling meadows that stretch for miles, mountains that reach for the heavens, and forests that are dense and unwieldy. But sometimes the most interesting and memorable places are the types which we seldom see, the ones which try to capture a different sense, one of claustrophobia, confusion, and tranquility. And no world does this mix up better than Subnautica, a planet set almost entirely underwater, with coral reefs and deep and perplexing caverns devoid of all light alike. And you see, there's a certain awe-inspiring nature to almost every zone in Subnautica, and that's because in large part, there just isn't anything else out there quite like it. That sense of weightlessness you get as you traverse around the environment, swimming through schools of fish and weird creatures that make distinct humming and screeching sounds from even miles away, is so fascinating and unique. There are so many moments when playing this game where you'll have to stop and appreciate the beauty of it all. Massive light shafts from the sun above pierce through the waves and illuminate the more shallow parts of the ocean. And as you go deeper and deeper, light instead starts to come from plant life scattered throughout the sea, only giving you small glimpses into its essence, with the rest needing a flashlight to explore. But the strangeness of it all wouldn't work if it wasn't for the great sense of exploration you get as well. There are endless labyrinthian caves and massive open spaces of nothingness, and simply traversing the environment in Subnautica is almost half the fun, because even in the spots where the game slows down and there's almost nothing for what seems like miles in any direction, there's still a sense of beauty in just wading your way through the unknown in an alien landscape unlike anything you've seen before, and slowly uncovering the mystery of this world. There are multiple zones in this game that will leave you speechless, like the sprawling tree cove or the embodying ferocity of the inactive lava zone. And what makes each of them so memorable is just how much work you had to put in to even get there. You had to upgrade your gear, you had to explore, and you had to put the pieces of so many puzzles together to finally uncover how to get to each spot. And that sense of wonder when traversing these zones only becomes greater when you see off into the distance a massive foreboding leviathan monstrosity hiding in the depths. And as you approach, you watch as it unfolds its structure into a beast primed to attack. Moments like this are what gives Subnautica its special sense of beauty, where you not only feel elevated finding a new undiscovered zone and just taking in the beauty of it all, but also a distinct sense of fear for what could be hiding in the shadows. It means that every moment you're playing this game, you have an almost uneasy yet excited burst of emotions in your head, and it truly keeps you on the edge of your seat, unlike so many other game worlds out there. I've seen a lot of games do beautiful open worlds or scary claustrophobic set pieces well, but so few manage to capture both in such a powerful way at the same time, and it's what makes Subnautica's world such a breath of fresh air. It's unlike anything else out there and relies on its beauty and horror alike to craft something that really taps into the heart of what makes game worlds so engaging in the first place. A push and pull against intensity and calmness all at once, where one wrong step could lead you into a leviathan's gaping maw, or a seabed bursting with neon colors and life instead. Sometimes the most beautiful adventures in our life are the ones that leave us wondering what's next, and more importantly, what's out there. there. And more than almost any game worlds of all time, Subnautica manages to capture a sense of awe and wonder that pierces our minds in what forms the adventure within all of us. I wish more than anything I could play this game again for the first time and once again experience those swells of emotion and speculation when charting into the unknown for the first time, unsure of what quite could be out there, but excited at the possibilities of it all. When you think back to the most memorable moments in your favorite games, what are they? For a lot of people, they're the fast-paced and bombastic set pieces, times of quick action or intensity, and moments where everything comes together. But sometimes, situations like this can be slower paced, more somber, more thoughtful, and in my opinion, even more impactful. And Death Stranding is a game about those moments. Making your way through rain-soaked hills and mountains, past an invisible monster which you can't even see, and towards, well, this. I remember when I first looked out into the distance at Port Knot City and realized just how beautiful of a world Death Stranding really is. An America that has gone through utter tragedy and back and seen its entire landscape swallowed whole by the fear of the unknown. But in this new and scary world, we get to see firsthand the birth of something alluring in its own right. A world full of monsters, sure, but one that places emphasis on the vastness and importance of the universe too. There's so many moments in this game where you will round a bend and be met with a massive and open sprawling wasteland, full of rocks and mossy grass alike, and in each of these key times, a song will start to berate the scene as it takes hold. Music begins to blare as you look out into the world in front of you on a mission not to kill and become the hero, but instead just to deliver a simple package. Because in this dying world holding on to its last breaths, the beauty and meaning truly comes from the experience itself. Seeing small bands of civilization working their hardest to stay alive and maintain the dream of humanity which we held for so long. Seeing a farm off in the distance spewing out a massive cloud of heat into the sky as rain overhead takes hold and kills everything in its path. In a lot of ways, so many of the scenes in Death Stranding almost make it feel like you are the last man on Earth, walking in a palace that feels more like Iceland in a cold winter's grasp than anything we've come to know in America. And the strange and ominous feelings you get traversing these areas, knowing that there are monsters and weird things happening everywhere, gives you an uneasy feeling that is only broken by the pure wonder of gazing out into the environment. There are no other games out there that focus this hard on the beauty of every scene alone. And quite literally, the entire point of Death Stranding is the antithesis to most other games. The slower moments, the beauty is the point. Soaking in the world and all it has to offer, hearing the faint sounds of an animal in the distance when you felt like you had heard nothing for so long before, or uncovering the mysteries to this world and what happened, and the core of how what you are seeing in front of you is even happening in the first place. Not only is the narrative to this game a complete mystery full of twists and turns, but even more impressively, so is the world. A world that begs to be appreciated and explored, as deep as it is expansive. Not because it has endless side quests or forts you have to clear of enemies, but because it really just gives you the impression that it has a story to tell all its own. You know, for all the open worlds out there that are really good looking, a lot of them forget the real beauty of art lies in the deeper meaning behind it all. The sunsets, the rainbows, and the echoes of sounds across multiple massive mountain ranges in Death Stranding aren't so magical because of how good they look and sound. It's because throughout every moment you play this game, the stage is being set to make moments like this all that more powerful. Moments that evoke a feeling within your soul, songs and chimes that pierce our hearts, and scenery that inspires greatness. Because while Death Stranding is a lot more boring than a lot of other beautiful game worlds out there, it hits at the core of what truly makes art meaningful in the first place, and captures emotions that only an experience like this could uniquely do. And that's why it's one of the most beautiful game worlds ever dreamed up. Elden Ring is a game of many faces. From the high and rocky cliffs of Illyria, the fearsome red skies of Caelid, to the underground beauty of the Chauffeur River. There are so many moments in this game where you simply have to sit back and take it all in. And while for many the combat, music, or boss encounters in this game are what they remember it for most, for me, it's without a doubt the world. It's unlike anything else out there, and because of its massive size and scale that feels like it goes on forever, more than most games, it starts to come across like a real place, with endless adventures to go on. I'll never forget the first time I found the ancestral spirit in the Chauffeur River and watched as it glided through the air and sent out a mysterious mist in its wake. Or when I first stumbled upon the capital of Lendel in the heart of the map and laid eyes upon a massive city strung with golden trees and golden abundance alike. Or that moment that you're teleported to the floating city of Farum Azula, where so many monsters were hiding all along. There's a beauty and essence to this game that's so beyond most others out there. Simply walking through the map and listening to the sounds in the distance, or looking out over a sprawling wasteland full of creatures and towns, every step you take in game almost feels like a painting come to life. And because of the lack of map markers or quest objectives showing up constantly on your minimap or UI, instead you are left to fend for yourself, and the world feels so much more alive because of it. But maybe the single most beautiful moments in this entire experience are the boss encounters, where you will get to watch entire arenas the size of cities come to life with explosions, colors, and waves of movement, all as massive creatures swarm around and take over the environment, becoming a spectacle that almost no other games can match. Elden Ring really is just one of those titles that has such a distinct focus on the beauty of the world and the feelings that it evokes, even in the biggest of combat encounters. And there are so many areas that are tailor-made to be explored and admired. Everywhere they could, FromSoft made sure that the scale of the game would always keep you in awe. And those moments hit all that much harder because of how hard and foreboding the world is too. Dying over and over again on a boss as you slowly become better over time, only to finally beat them, becomes so much more powerful when in the next moment you are met with an entirely new zone full of splendor and scale alike. Like when you first discover a crazy underground city by accident and look up into the ceilings and bellows of the cave network only to find a sea of stars that has enveloped the entire zone. Or walking for the first time into Volcano Manor and stumbling upon its endless halls that harken back to dark and twisted medieval art we see in the Dark Souls series as well. And again, one of the biggest things here that makes Elden Ring's world so beautiful and so memorable is its insane amount of scale. There just aren't any other titles out there that get it quite this right, and when you're riding torrent through a valley at any moment, you're able to look to the right or left and become utterly captivated by just how much out there is, and how little expense was spared when creating this world. And knowing you can go everywhere you see just adds to that sense of scale, that sense of beauty that this world is so focused on. Elden Ring really is just another example of how open worlds and games should be, with less focus on fetch quests, map markers, and making sure action is happening every 2 minutes, and more focus on crafting something that truly feels unique and interesting. A world that you can get utterly lost in due to nothing more than the fire that it lights in our souls to carry on and discover more. An open world that is as anxiety-inducing as it is calming and serene, one of the most beautiful worlds in the game's medium to date. Beauty doesn't always come from colorful and upbeat lighting or vast open plains of wilderness. Sometimes beauty comes from within, or even from the darkest places in our humanity. Broken down and graffitied sidewalks, trash and despair littering your entire field of view, and most importantly, a heart beneath all of that tragedy that serves as a beacon of light amongst all the hate. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most beautiful game worlds of all time, not because it has amazing graphics, ray tracing, and architecture, but because each place in this world tells a story that gnaws at the core of what it means to be human. More than maybe any game out there, the world, the city of Cyberpunk is its own character, one full of violence, tragedy, but also beauty, from the rolling and dusty plains of the Badlands to the chaos at City Center. Each location in Cyberpunk 2077 feels lived in and like it's composed of a history all to its own. You can sense a concentration of wealth in some locations, while others are characterized by struggle at every turn. And beneath every building, atop every roof, are stories of harrowing betrayal and the lowest points of the human condition. There is death, murder, and ritualistic offerings around every bend, and it really gives off the impression that this is a world born and bred by destruction and disarray. But as you peel back the layers to this universe more, you discover that it isn't about how corporations ruin the world or about how everyone is out for themselves. It's about those characters and the people you meet. About how despite all of the hardships that everyone has become accustomed to, that there's a deep sense of humanity and love still at the heart of many people. Looking into the eyes and souls of the characters you meet on this journey as they suffer some of the greatest hardships known to man, you get the sense that there's a beauty to this game that's almost hard to put into words. Sitting with Carrie Eurodyne on his boat sifting through the waves, or holding Judy against your chest as she cries in pain at losing the one she held most close. What really makes the world of Cyberpunk so beautiful is that it turns a mirror onto our own and makes us ask the questions we all ought to in our real lives. And now with Phantom Liberty 2, the best zone in the game has come to life, where in Dogtown simply walking around is an experience in itself. Buildings that reach into the sky, surrounded by rundown shacks and shanty towns that lend themselves as homes to the less fortunate. More than maybe any game in my life, Cyberpunk is the one that made me appreciate all of this the most. There were so many times in my playthrough where I would just stop to take it all in, walking slowly in every location and just watching the people, the city come to life, where I listened to the sounds and took inspiration from the verticality of it all and the insanely detailed and thoughtful architecture. There is no other game that even comes close to how real this city feels, with all the back alleys and hidden rooftops and ways to get to places. It truly is the most breathtaking single city ever put in a game. And with path and ray tracing included, this means every bit of light refracts and cascades across each scene with extreme precision, and it makes every little detail pop. Each new location, item, and character looks so much more grounded and real. There are moments in this game where you will be caught off guard by just how amazing it looks from a purely graphical standpoint, and it really adds to the immersion in a way so many other games don't. I know a lot of people talk about how gameplay matters more than graphics, and while I agree, I think graphics and art design can play such a key role in making a world feel immersive and real, and thus creating a sense of awe that otherwise would be missing, and Cyberpunk has this in spades. And throughout it all, you're accompanied by one of the greatest soundtracks ever, where simply driving around hundreds of miles an hour through busy streets and listening to heavy metal rock music is just another day at work. So when those slower moments with characters do hit, as you look out onto a sunset, over a river or atop a mountain, it hits all that harder, and reminds us that even in the most twisted and terrifying places, ones full of hatred and sorrow, there's still a beauty beneath it all that can light a fire within our souls unlike anything else out there. A beauty you have to play to understand. A lot of the times we praise worlds and games for being vibrant, energetic, or impressive in scale, but sometimes a more dreary, more intimate tone can hit just as hard. And in the case of Alan Wake 2's world, this certainly is the case. Composed of many dark grays and foreboding sounds, the world of Alan Wake 2 is one of horror and beauty alike. You'll find yourself creeping slowly through dark, water-infested marshes, or through massive tree lines alike, or even diving into the depths of the characters' minds themselves. But throughout it all, the game never ceases to look stunning. There's a fog that litters most of the environments in game and adds a sense of uneasy tension. The way the light streams in through the clouds on a foggy morning almost looks like real life at times. And some of the sections later in the game consist of environments that almost feel like they have been dreamed up inside the mind of a man on the verge of collapse. There are sections in this game moving through an almost hellish New York City, where lights will flicker on and off and the shadows of the damned will pursue you in agony. Or other moments like seeing the lights lights of a nearby TV screen refract off a nearby puddle as you barrel your way through hordes of enemies, or hearing the creepy sounds of an amusement park in the distance as you near it, creating a sense of immersion that only a game with the most cutting-edge tech could give. It's next-gen in all the best ways possible, and when you add in the impressive facial animations and path tracing, this game has the potential to look almost photorealistic at times. And being set in the Pacific Northwest suits this so well, because it feels like you're in the newest episode of a crime show on Netflix the entire time. Maybe the most impressive part of it all, though, is how real-world acting and scenes are intertwined into this adventure. You'll be wandering around a dark subway tunnel when suddenly a TV flickers on and you're met with actual real-life actors playing out a role. And in other parts of the game, these types of scenes are mixed interchangeably with actual gameplay, and it creates an experience unlike anything else out there, something specific to Remedy games. And while it can get really strange and out there at times, the core of this experience is so moving and beautiful in its own way. At the end of each chapter, you are met with songs that inspire hope, dread, or uneasiness alike, and they help to add brevity to a situation that feels so dense otherwise. And throughout it all, you will constantly be thrown into new environments full of creepy characters and engagements while you try to slowly piece together what is even going on with this story and this world. And the guiding light for me on this journey was always knowing that if I just played a little longer, there would be a new zone to explore, a new secret to uncover, and something beautiful to unearth. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but in Alan Wake 2's case, I think it's undeniable just how much of a looker this game really is. And it's just further proof to the fact that graphics, art style, and beauty are important to the game's medium, and serve a much bigger purpose than most give it credit for. The whole reason this game is able to hit as hard as it does is because it taps into the most primal sense of dread within all of us from a visual and audio perspective, and reveals that even in bouts of true horror and damnation, there's a beauty beneath it all, too. Shadow of the Colossus is a cult classic that many people nowadays might not even know about. It was originally released in 2005 and at the time was beloved for the experience it provided unlike anything else out there. And to this day, that experience still remains so powerful. And that's because of the world and the beauty it managed to capture at such a weird moment in time. In the game, you traverse massive and open landscapes that go on for miles and simply meander in any direction towards your goal. And along the way, you are met with titans of immense scale that can be fought by climbing their entire bodies to reach weak points and deal fatal damage. Not only is it a cool concept for a game, but also it lends itself to so many astounding set pieces where you'll find yourself feeling what feels like titans in a massive canyon. This was before games were really focused on bombastic set pieces like this. And even more impressively, Shadows of the Colossus does it in real time. But even for all the amazing fights, still to this day, the most memorable thing about the game is the world and its environments. Walking through an open field of grass and peering off into the distance to see armies of waterfalls and cliffs accompanied by ancient structures of a civilization long destroyed. There's a strange sense of calmness and coldness you get when playing this game, and because of the time period it was constructed in, it still has that eerie gray glow that was a staple of games at the time, courtesy of Gears of War. But while in most games I hate this look as it just feels washed out and bland, for some reason here in Shadow of the Colossus, it fits perfectly. It adds a sense of drabness to the world that elevates its intrigue, where otherwise it would probably come off as too childish and insubstantial. And because of that, a world that should be bland actually has so much life to it. Even at moments where you are traversing a wide open desert and almost everything on your screen is sand with less than stellar physics reactions, it still feels like home for some reason. It's one of those game worlds that just happens to hit an odd sense of calmness that puts you at ease, and it makes every combat encounter that much more epic because of how serene the other moments in the game world are. Later into the game too, you will find many mega structures and fortresses that lay dormant yet still tell a story all to their own. And finding these scattered across such a desolate wasteland that stretches for miles once again just adds to the oddities of this world that bring it all together. And finally, at the forefront of it all is the sounds and music. Listening to the hooves of your horse clap against the ground or wind as it howls across the canyons in game. The world world constantly feels like it's almost in slow motion, and almost brings you into a trance that no other game in history matches. At so many points when playing this game, you will almost feel like a song should be starting to play like it would in any other title, but the developers had the restraint here to instead let the world and its beauty speak for itself, allowing you to be completely smothered by its confidence. I'm usually a fan of newer games over old, somehow finding myself in the opposite predicament of most people who love older games and their nostalgia, but Shadows of the Colossus is one of those select few that, despite how many decades old it is now, continues to prove that real art is all about the feelings and design, not the best new engine. I've always been a sucker for artistic indie games, and while they're not everyone's cup of tea, when you find one that hits right just for you, they really are great. And for me, one of those darlings for sure has to be Inside. It's from a studio that has since been through a good amount of turmoil, but Inside still to this day reigns as one of the most beautiful game worlds out there, in its own weird little way. And that's because Inside is unapologetically itself. Every scene in the game is shrouded in deep and dark shadows, and no matter where you go, there's a sense of helplessness and strangeness to it all. You find yourself as a boy without a face, who's traveling through a world where it seems that there are sort of mind-controlled husks that are hunting you down and out to get you. But the real beauty of the game comes from the odd story it tells, and how the world unfolds itself to you so masterfully. There are so many times in Inside where almost nothing is happening, yet still the experience is so engaging because of how mysterious and strange the world really is. Oftentimes you'll be making your way through a dense forest and see a foreboding figure hiding in the distance, or you'll have to make your way through a secret underwater megastructure with multiple hints at a crazy past. And more than anything, the setting here is just so fantastic. I don't usually enjoy games that focus on a lot of darkness or lack of light, but here it fits the scenes perfectly. You'll come across strange rooms full of fantastical sci-fi elements, and the world and its almost black and white nature really adds to the immersion every time. Even basic puzzles about trying to jump to higher spots will often involve things in the world like a pig that's been taken over by a parasite, and these narrative moments only add to the intrigue and the mystery of the whole adventure. It's not even that fun of a game to play, if I'm being honest, but the setting and world is just so powerful that it brings you into every moment. Sometimes the best thing a game world can do is actually restrain itself, to force you as the player to come up with ideas and plots of your own, and construct a narrative to it all that makes sense to you. And because of how much of a blank slate a lot of Inside really is, it means your mind will constantly be racing while you play about what's really going on. And the art style and design completely surrender themselves to this goal. Where something like Limbo was great but lacking, Inside is the true realization of a mystery game world like this. At times it can feel like a scary children's book come to life, something akin to the Little Nightmares series, but there's also a hard to place whimsical and hopeful feeling behind it all that makes it shine more than its peers. Because while Inside can look depressing or boring at first glance, there's a story and world here that it contains that really capture a sense of imagination you have to play for yourself to understand. And more than anything else about the game, it's the world and how beautiful it is that sells the product. Empty warehouses devoid of clutter but filled to the brim with darkness, or creepy lab rooms that have a history full of business but now lie distinctly lonely. It's the kind of game world that's the perfect fit for a rainy day at home that will capture a sense of uneasiness while also putting a smile on your face. Often less is more when it comes to worlds and games, because it can ignite our imaginations to come up with stories of our own, and Inside does a fantastic job at creating a world that does just that. The Horizon series is home to some of the most breathtaking visuals in the game's medium to date, and none more so than the recent entry, Horizon Forbidden West. This landscape is full of vibrant and punchy colors, gargantuan structures, and underwater utopias, and in each of them is a life to its own. Abnormal robotic beasts patrol every corner of this post-apocalyptic paradise, and for me at least, the world of this game is far and away its shining achievement. Because while the story and its twists and turns of the first game are what made it so grand, here it's all about the incredible beauty of the game world. Simply soaring or gliding around these environments is unlike anything else out there. You can see miles and miles ahead of you, a world filled to the brim with a variety of landscapes that each house unbelievable graphics and presentation thanks to the Decima engine. My personal favorites are the underwater zones, which are teeming with plant and animal life alike, each contained within an impressive amount of color and detail. They feel feel so alien yet so familiar at the same time, and they serve as a look into just how fantastical this setting and world can really get. But even the more recognizable places like deserts, woodlands, or snowy peaks all have a beauty to their own too. Without a doubt, this is one of the best looking games of all time, not only because the fidelity is so high, but also because of the art design of the world, one that isn't afraid to use dashing colors or contrast to make each scene pop. And because of how the story is structured and the reveals it makes, there are other scenes in this game that tell an even different story, but one filled with the same distinct art style that makes it all pop. And just when it felt like the game wasn't impressive enough, so many of the combat encounters in this experience feel like something out of a movie. Watching entire environments come to life with petals flowing through the air as creatures the size of your screen tear it apart and rampage towards you. And in the battles, you must dodge, roll, and use your wits to overpower what looks to be insurmountable foes. It all just comes together in such a beautiful way that so few games are able to actually capture. And I really mean it when I say there are times in this game where you will literally be dumbfounded by just how good it all looks, where you will be swimming through an underwater cave or making your way through a huge open environment and be completely awestruck by what you're seeing in front of you. HDR was made for games like this, and in my opinion, the world on offer here is so grand, so beautiful, and so breathtaking that even though other aspects of the game can be lacking, it just doesn't matter when you are met with scenes like this. And the fact that it all runs so well and so smoothly just adds to the immersion of this wonderful and alluring world. Even just the way that trees and grass sway in the handles of the wind, or even how your feet leave marks on the sand or snow alike while kicking up dirt. The entire presentation of this game is a testament to just how far games have come visually, and why game worlds as a foundation have so much more potential than any other mediums out there. Because beautiful game worlds like this tell a story all to their own. They in a way become the main characters of the adventure, and they're the fuel behind the fire which rouses in our hearts. Not every game has to be as beautiful or as striking as Horizon Forbidden West, but Horizon certainly does show that simply beauty itself and nothing else can add so much to a fantasy or sci-fi world. Because at the core of what makes games great is our imaginations, and what better way to tap into that than a world that you can't help but get utterly lost in. I've always been of the belief that the best possible game world imaginable, the one with the most intrigue, the most vast and interesting spaces, and the one with the most beauty would be one set in space. But sadly, because of how hard it is to capture this setting compared to things like traditional fantasy, it's seldom studios take the risk on it. We have things like No Man's Sky and Star Citizen, but they are either not quite everything we need or not fully done yet. Luckily for us though, we do have Starfield, which despite its many issues, is still home to some of the most breathtaking worlds out there. And that's because one of the most exciting parts of Starfield is the idea of what's out there. The planets, the cities, and the random events that can occur in the vastness of space. And while most of it falls flat, some of the environments truly are breathtaking. Landing on a massive ice ball of a moon hovering across a nearby planet and seeing the sun rise in the distance is a feeling no other game gives. And just looking out into the vastness of the planets and space alike is so moving. You can set up an outpost on a planet and just sit in a chair as the sounds of the world carry on and a nearby sun or planet hovers close by as night begins to fall. And it's moments like that that really show what a beautiful universe Starfield can really have at times. Some of the cities like New Atlantis and Neon have an impressive scale and use of colors, along with multiple different zones that highlight just how great the art design can really be. I hound Bethesda all day on things I wish they could do better, but one thing they certainly got right in many cases is how impressive a lot of the interiors in Starfield are too. There are seemingly endless locations across multiple planets full of distinct and varied architecture and stories all to their own. And because of how open the game's format is, it makes it all that more powerful when you stumble upon something with so much care put into it. There were so many times in my playthroughs of the game where I would land on a random planet not knowing what to expect and be met with a sea of strange and interesting animal and plant life that filled my screen with colors I hadn't seen before. Seeing a mountain in the distance and knowing that you can climb it, finding a nearby river and deciding to put up an outpost because of how rare rivers are on planets, or traveling up multiple stories of a megastructure lost on a moon. And even though so much of the environments and places are procedurally generated, it still doesn't take away from how eye-catching they can be at times. After all, nature itself isn't that hard to simulate, and nature just on its own, without any touch-ups, is so stunning in its own right. Maybe the single most beautiful parts of the worlds, though, are those planets with almost nothing on them at all. Because after all, one of the most haunting yet exhilarating parts of space is just how empty it can really be. And landing on these massive balls of nothingness really puts into perspective how grand and impressive the universe really is. And that's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Looking out into a galaxy and just wondering what's out there. Wondering if there may be some higher power or unknown forces at work that have crafted the very places we stand on, or if it's nothing more than a math equation firing into infinity. The things that make Starfield so beautiful despite all of its flaws is there just aren't any other games out there that seize this kind of feeling currently, whether it be due to scale or setting, and it just shows how good space games could be and how much potential the setting really has. Worlds and universes that truly have the potential to be anything, and in many ways are the holy grail to what a game world could be like and just how beautiful they could be. It's why I get excited about things like Mass Effect Next or Star Citizen, because there's a scale and sense to space that you can't encapsulate with fantasy alone, and that astounding sense of loneliness with hope is one I personally find so fascinating. You know what the coolest part of being a Viking would have been? The adventure. Sailing the high seas, playing your favorite tunes with friends, and looking out into the world knowing it was yours to conquer. Luckily for us though, there is one world out there that gives us a taste of just that. Valheim is one of my favorite games I almost never talk about, and that's because while I did eventually grow bored of endless gathering and basic combat mechanics, the world of Valheim itself is so engrossing. Each time you start up a new game, you are placed onto a randomly generated and massive map, but each zone and section of the map follows a set of rules from the biome in which it's set in, and certain locations can only be found on the edges of the map, meaning the further you venture out, the more crazy things you'll find. There are underground caves full of monsters and loot, enormous bosses all with their own mechanics that need a team to take them down, and countless areas that would make the perfect new base to set up. Throughout it all though, the shining light is the beauty of the world, and how it inspires you to keep venturing on. From snowy peaks with howling winds to mysterious and bone-chilling swamps that will test your team's patience and skill. Each new zone in Valheim brings with it a set of creatures, obstacles, and best of all, adventure, where you will never quite be sure what's around the next corner, and because of how free-flowing the game and its mantra are, it means that creating your own story is really that easy. Walking through a forest endlessly in one direction is sure to eventually lead to a new song and interesting place, and because of the heavy focus on survival mechanics as well, along with the ability to cut down any tree or destroy any rock, the world feels alive in a way many other survival open world games don't. You may decide to set up your camp at the heart of a forest, atop a massive mountaintop, or even by the sea itself. And within each of these homes, you have the ability to create some of the coziest and most soothing rooms imaginable that all feel like home. Mighty fireplaces where your team can gather around and tell stories, or sprawling kitchens full of ingredients and tools to create a massive feast. More than anything, the game really captures our fantasized ideas of what being a Viking explorer would have been like, and constructs a world full of so much excellence. Some of the most memorable moments are just building with friends, creating something new, or making a massive Viking warship that you can sail into the high seas towards land masses you've never seen before, all while being attacked by creatures beyond our wildest imaginations. A lot of the time, the beauty of a game's world comes from that sense of exploration they can give us, and Valheim is a perfect example of the type of exploration that can make a lasting impact. Creating a game where the best moments are just sitting in your base, listening to music, and watching a fire burn in your cozy wooden metropolis, venturing out into a world begging to be conquered, and discovering all the secrets and mysteries along the way. Journey isn't a game, it's art. And at the forefront of this artistic endeavor is the world. No dialogue, no deep story with twists and turns, no overarching narrative that underpins it all, but rather an endless ocean of ideas to sift through and fall in love with. You see, Journey is an extremely short indie game that was released many years ago now, but even to this day, it's the perfect example of just how powerful good art design and direction can be in any game. For almost the entire runtime of the journey, no pun intended, you will be doing nothing but walking forward, side to side, or gliding through the air, trying to either avoid detection or making your way to the next area, of which there are many. But while on paper this sounds so boring and pointless, when you actually sit down and play it yourself, the meaning behind it all comes to life. The mundaneness of basically playing a walking simulator for hours is immediately whisked away when you get to see what's on screen in front of you. Endless miles of desert with an almost romantic color filter injected into the lens, and no other guiding light than simply your eyes and where they'll take you next. It flips the concept of open worlds on their head in many ways and gives the player full control of their journey and what to do. There are no side quests, no mini maps, no map markers, just a world that gives you the faintest hints of what to do next. It's one of the simplest games out there, and yet it still manages to evoke such a strong sense of discovery despite its lack of depth, because it really is wild just how much story and emotions can come across from nothing other than splendid visuals and sounds. Journey is the perfect example of why beautiful worlds and games are so impactful and important, because this is a game that offers quite literally nothing more than just that, and yet it still sits in the pantheon of some of the most celebrated games of all time. Walking through icy tundras as a cold chill barrels its way towards you, while the sounds of violins cascade through mountain ranges nearby, is a visceral experience that relies completely on the audience's full attention and interest. And while for some people that means this game will fall very flat and is nothing more than a boring waste of time, for others, it can inspire a sense of passion and beauty through nothing more than a world worth getting lost in. It's not always about the destination. Sometimes it's about the journey. Mass Effect 1 is, in my opinion, the best Mass Effect game ever made, and it's not even close. I love the story, the villains, and the locations that to this day almost no other games have matched. But maybe the single most intriguing factor about this timeless classic is the beautiful world which it introduced us to. Not a world full of realistic graphics and ray tracing, but one that instead sought to capture our hearts and souls, crafting places and memories that will forever stand the test of time, like Sovereign's greatest villain speech ever in a game, or the final battle at the Citadel. There's a distinct style and essence that only the Mass Effect series envelops, and the first installment was the one that really nailed it. There are cold and brooding planets full of top secret research like Noveria and Pharos, and others that feel more like a paradise light years away from home, a la Vermeer. But through it all is a distinct sense of a high-tech world fashioned from science and ingenuity, full of places like the Citadel, characterized by blinding white and pristine color hues. And you know, oftentimes sci-fi tries to feel more grounded in a way, providing locations that almost look like something out of the modern day, but with a few enhancements. But Mass Effect 1 isn't like that. It's unapologetically advanced. Everything you go to feels futuristic in a good way. And because of how foreign many places can feel, it's all the more interesting really diving into every location and the lore behind it. Even with the now dated graphics and gameplay, often combined with muted color tones reminiscent of games of the Xbox 360 era, there still is so much beauty that can be extracted from the entire ensemble. And that's because one of my favorite things about some old games is that they can light our imaginations even more than newer titles, because where they lack in believability, our brains can fill in the gaps. And what better place to do that than an entire universe that is begging to be explored with dozens of new alien races and fascinating lore to really dig through. You know, there's a galaxy map in the game where you can set your sights on every planet and asteroid in the Milky Way. And even for the ones you can't travel to, just reading into the deep lore and science behind every location never gets old. Part of having a world worth getting lost in is making it feel like a real place with a real history to it that you get rewarded for digging into. And on top of that, there's also tons of desolate barren rocks that you can land on that really make the universe feel expansive. Because while moments like this can be boring and tedious after some time, it adds to the beauty and wonder of this galaxy legacy and world that just keeps on giving the more you give to it. And honestly, there really is just something about that 80s simplistic Art Deco style in some of the interiors and the creepy yet hauntingly beautiful dread that some of the scenes evoke that add to the whole experience. Whether it be underground neon lit bars and clubs, or massive sprawling valleys that stretch into the distance that you can drive through, all barred by invisible walls, there's a magic to this game and its world that is just so unique to the time it was made in and the style of RPGs at that period. As I said, I'm the type of person that loves newer games and updated graphics and just having the best of the best. But sometimes you have to sit back and appreciate just how beautiful some of the older stuff was in its own way too. And I think Mass Effect 1 is a prime candidate for making a sci-fi world that really catches not only your eyes, but your soul. Overall though, I think beauty in games is just so underrated. There's such a strong emphasis nowadays on gameplay first, or captivating stories, and while I certainly think these things are really important, I also can't help but shake the feeling that most of the games that have left the most impact on me did so first and foremost because of the worlds they so masterfully crafted. And maybe the most important part of the formula is the beauty in it all. Those environments, places, and characters that evoke a sense of deeper meaning within our hearts and souls. And while my list here is the games I personally find to have the most beautiful worlds, there's so many others out there I either missed or simply didn't include in this video because it had to end at some point. And really, one of the best parts about gaming as a whole is that it allows us to decide which of those games are beautiful to us for whatever reason. So let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think are the most beautiful game worlds of all time and why. And also, if you guys want to support the channel more, make sure to follow my Instagram or Twitter pages, as well as check out the membership program right on this channel. It really helps me to pay all the people I hire to help out here. Thank you guys so much for the support month in and month out. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out some of my other stuff. I make a lot of content just like this, and a lot of it's recent, so check out the channel page. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic day, and until next time.